What would you do if saving your child meant marrying a stranger who lived in the shadows of the city? When billionaire CEO Julianne Halloway knelt in a rain-soaked alley and begged a homeless man to save her dying daughter, she never expected his answer. He was her only hope, a perfect bone marrow match hidden in plain sight. But his condition wasn't about money. It was about something far more dangerous, the truth about who she really was and the ground she'd forgotten beneath her billion-dollar empire. Welcome, dear friends, to a story about sacrifice, redemption, and the unexpected places we find salvation. Before we begin this journey together, I want to thank you for being here. If this story speaks to you, if you believe in second chances and the power of love that breaks through every barrier, I'd be deeply honored if you'd consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life, stories that remind us that grace can be found even in the darkest alleys. Now let's step into Julianne's world and discover what happens when desperation meets an impossible condition. The rain tasted like copper and exhaust fumes. Julianne Halloway knelt on wet asphalt behind the Gramercy Hotel, her $12,000 gown soaking through at the knees. The fabric clung to her skin, cold and accusatory. Inside, 200 donors were drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than most people earned in a week. Out here, the only sound was water hammering the dumpsters and her own ragged breathing. The man on the milk crate didn't look up. "Please," she said, "marry me." He was eating something from a crumpled paper bag, peanuts maybe, or crackers. His fingers were long and clean despite everything else. The sleeves of his coat were frayed at the cuffs, but the stitching was precise, almost surgical. He chewed slowly. "You're kneeling in garbage," he said. "I know. There's a needle 3 inches from your left hand." She didn't move. "I need you to hear me." He finally looked at her. His eyes were the color of slate after a storm, and they didn't blink. The streetlight caught the edge of his jaw, a face that should have been on magazine covers, not sleeping under bridges. There was a scar running from his temple to his cheekbone, thin and deliberate. You don't know me," he said. "Your name is Bram Vancamp. You're 41 years old. You tested positive as a bone marrow match for my daughter 3 weeks ago. You're the only one in the entire global registry." He went still. The paper bag crinkled in his grip. "The hospital tried to contact you," Julianne continued. Her voice cracked. She hated that. "They sent letters to the last address on file, a shelter on 8th Avenue, but you don't stay anywhere long enough for mail. So you hired someone to find me. 7 people. It took them 19 days. The rain was getting harder. Her hair hung in ropes across her face. Somewhere above them, a window slammed shut. Bram set the bag down carefully, as if it contained something fragile. "What's wrong with your daughter?" "Acute myeloid leukemia, stage 4. She's 8 years old, and she weighs 53 pounds. Julianne's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs. "The chemotherapy stopped working 6 months ago. We've tried experimental treatments in Switzerland, Japan, Houston. Nothing. The doctors say she has maybe 12 weeks without a transplant." "And you're rich?" "Yes. Rich enough to throw galas, rich enough to hire private investigators to track down homeless men." "Yes." He leaned back against the brick wall. His coat fell open, revealing a shirt that might have been white once. "Then why are you out here instead of inside, convincing me with lawyers and contracts?" Julianne swallowed. The truth sat in her throat, like broken glass. Because my lawyers told me it wouldn't work. You can't be compelled to donate. It's your body, your choice. They said the best approach was to offer compensation, money, housing, medical care for life. But I know what that sounds like. A transaction. Yes. And you thought begging would be different? No. She wiped rain from her face. It didn't help. I thought honesty might be. Bram studied her for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a cigarette. He didn't light it, just held it between two fingers, rolling it back and forth. "What's her name?" he asked. "Cleo." "After the Egyptian queen?" "After my grandmother." Julianne's chest tightened. "She loves astronomy, wants to be an astronaut. She has a telescope in her hospital room, and every night she maps constellations she can't even see through the city lights." "You're trying to make her real to me." "She is real. To you." Bram put the cigarette away. I don't know her. I don't know you. And you're asking me to let someone cut into my bones because your daughter, who I've never met, is dying. That's not honesty. That's emotional leverage." Julianne felt something crack inside her chest. She'd known this was possible, likely even. But hearing it out loud made it real. "You're right," she said quietly. "You're absolutely right. I'm sorry." She started to stand. Her knees screamed in protest, and her dress was ruined, and inside the gala, her absence had probably already been noticed. The board would use this. They'd call her unstable, unfit. They'd been circling for months, waiting for proof that she couldn't handle the pressure. "Wait." Bram's voice was soft, but it stopped her cold. He stood slowly, unfolding to his full height. He was taller than she'd expected, at least 6'2", maybe more. The coat hung off his shoulders like an accusation. "I'll do it," he said, "but I have conditions." Julianne's heart lurched. "Anything." "Don't say that yet." His smile was sharp enough to cut. "You might not like them." The coffee shop on Lexington was empty, except for a kid behind the counter, scrolling through his phone. Bram had suggested it. Neutral ground, he'd said, and Julianne hadn't argued. She sat across from him, in a booth with cracked vinyl seats, her ruined gown covered by an overcoat someone had loaned her. The coat smelled like cigarettes and rain. Bram ordered black coffee. She ordered the same, though she knew she wouldn't drink it. "First condition," he said. "The medical procedure happens on my terms. My doctors, my timeline, my hospital, not yours." Julianne nodded slowly. "That's reasonable. But Cleo doesn't have much time." "I know. I'll move fast. But I need control over this part." He paused. "I have reasons." "What reasons?" "That's not part of the negotiation." She bit back a dozen questions. "Fine. What else?" Bram wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. His fingers were scarred, small nicks and lines that suggested manual labor, or something worse. "Second condition. Before I sign any marriage papers, you spend 30 days living my life." Julianne blinked. "I don't understand." "You will." He met her eyes. 30 days on the streets. No money, no phone, no safety net. You sleep where I sleep, eat what I eat, and survive the way I survive. If you make it the full month, I'll marry you and donate the marrow. If you quit early, the deal's off." The words hit her like a fist. That's insane." "Is it?" "My daughter is dying, and you want me to play homeless for a month? What does that prove?" "That you understand the ground." Bram's voice was calm, almost gentle. "You kneel in an alley for 5 minutes and think you know what desperation looks like. You don't. You go home to a penthouse and Egyptian cotton sheets and a daughter who has doctors around the clock. I go back to a cardboard box under the FDR drive. You want me to save your daughter's life? Fine, but you're going to remember what it costs to be invisible first. Julianne's jaw tightened. This is about punishment. No, it's about perspective. He took a sip of coffee. You're a billionaire, Julianne. You've forgotten what the ground feels like. I'm offering you a chance to remember. She wanted to throw the coffee in his face. Walk out. He find another match. There had to be someone else in the registry, someone who wouldn't play these games. But she knew that wasn't true. Cleo's genetics were a nightmare. The odds of finding another match before the cancer finished its work were astronomical. What about Cleo? She asked. I can't just disappear for a month. She's in the hospital. You'll visit her once a week, supervised. 30 minutes, no more. The rest of the time, you're with me. The board will destroy me. They're already looking for reasons to force me out. Then I guess you'll have to be smart about it. Bram leaned forward. Third condition. When this is over, when your daughter is healthy and the board is handled, you tell me the truth about why you really need this marriage. Julianne froze. I already told you. For the transplant? Bullshit. His voice was soft, but the word landed like a slap. You don't need to marry me for the procedure. You could offer me $10 million and a penthouse, and I'd probably take it. But you led with marriage. That means there's something else, something you're not saying. Her pulse hammered in her ears. He was right. God, he was right. And she hated how easily he'd seen through her. If I tell you now, no, not now. When it's over, that's the condition. She stared at him. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his face. He looked patient, unmovable. Why does it matter? She asked. Because lies are expensive. Bram drained his coffee in one long swallow. Ewan and I don't work for free. The shelter on 9th Avenue smelled like bleach and sweat, and something Julianne couldn't identify. The woman at the intake desk didn't look up when they entered. 2 beds, Bram said. Separated or together? Separated. The woman slid 2 worn wristbands across the counter. Dinner's at 6. Lights out at 9. No drugs, no weapons, no bullshit. You break the rules, you're out. Julianne took the wristband. It was orange plastic, cracked at the edges. Her fingers felt numb. They climbed 3 flights of stairs that creaked underfoot. The walls were painted institutional green, peeling in places to reveal older layers, blue, yellow, something that might have been pink. Voices echoed from behind closed doors. Laughter, shouting, a baby crying somewhere distant. Your room's down here, Bram said, and pointing to a door marked 3F. Mine's across the hall. Don't lose the wristband. They check at night. Julianne pushed open the door. The room was maybe 8 feet by 10. 4 bunk beds, 3 of them occupied. A woman in her 50s sat on the bottom bunk closest to the door, reading a paperback with a broken spine. She glanced up, took in Julianne's overcoat and heels, and went back to her book. Top bunk's yours, she said. Keep your stuff close. People steal. Julianne climbed the ladder. The mattress was thin, covered in a scratchy wool blanket that smelled like industrial detergent. There was no pillow. She lay down on her back and stared at the water-stained ceiling. This was impossible. She couldn't do this for 30 days. Cleo needed her. The board needed her. The company needed her. But Bram's face floated behind her closed eyelids, calm and implacable. You're going to remember what the ground feels like. She didn't sleep. At midnight, someone knocked on the door across the hall. Julianne heard Bram's voice, low and even, and then footsteps retreating. She climbed down from the bunk, carefully, trying not to wake anyone, and slipped into the hallway. Bram was standing by the window at the end of the corridor, looking out at the street below. He didn't turn when she approached. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "No. Give it a week. You'll sleep through anything." Julianne leaned against the wall. Her back hurt. Her knees hurt. Everything hurt. "Why are you doing this?" "I told you." Perspective. "That's not an answer." He was quiet for a long time. Then, 5 years ago, and I had a corner office on the 43rd floor of a building in Midtown. I had a 6-figure salary and a company car and people who said yes to everything I wanted. And I thought I was invincible. Julianne waited. Then the company collapsed. Bad investments, worse decisions. People lost their jobs, their pensions, their houses. Bram's voice was flat, emotionless. "I lost everything too. But that wasn't the punishment. The punishment was realizing how easy it is to fall, how fast you go from the 43rd floor to the gutter." "What company?" He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The kind you've probably never heard of. We didn't make headlines, we just disappeared. And you ended up here." Eventually, he turned to face her. "You think you're different because you've built something, because you have power. But power is just altitude, Julianne. And altitude doesn't mean anything when the ground comes up to meet you." She wanted to argue, to tell him she'd fought for every inch of what she'd built, that she wasn't some trust fund princess who'd inherited her way to the top. But the words felt hollow in her mouth. "Cleo's transplant," she said instead. "How soon can we do it?" "I'll call my doctor tomorrow, set up the screening. If everything checks out, maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks is cutting it close. I know." His eyes were steady. "But that's the timeline. Take it or leave it." Julianne closed her eyes. She could see Cleo in her hospital bed, pale and fragile, her bald head resting against starched pillows. She could see the monitors beeping their steady rhythm, the IV drip feeding poison and hope into her veins. "I'll take it," she whispered. The emergency meeting was scheduled for Thursday at noon. Julianne found out about it from a text message sent to her personal phone, the one she wasn't supposed to have, but had hidden in the lining of her coat. She read it standing in line for breakfast at the shelter, surrounded by people spooning watery oatmeal into paper bowls. "Board convening emergency session. Your presence required. Failure to attend will be noted." The text was from Gerald Fisk, the company's CFO, a man who'd smiled at her across conference tables for 5 years while quietly sharpening knives. She deleted the message and shoved the phone back into her coat. "Problem?" Bram was behind her in line, holding a tray. "The board is making their move." "Expected. I need to be there." "No." He took a bowl of oatmeal from the counter. You agreed to 30 days. It's been 3. They'll vote me out if I don't show up." "Probably." He found an empty table and sat down. "What's your company called?" "Halloway Industries. We manufacture medical imaging equipment, MRI machines, CT scanners, PET systems." Bram stirred his oatmeal slowly. "Revenue? 4.2 billion last year. Profit margin? 18%. Debt?" She hesitated. "Manageable." "Meaning high." He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. "Who's leading the takeover?" "Fisk, and probably Karen Detweiler, the head of operations. Maybe 2 others on the board." "Do they have cause?" "They'll manufacture it. Say I'm neglecting my duties. that I'm mentally unstable after Cleo's diagnosis, that the company needs stable leadership. Are they wrong? Julianne's hand tightened around her spoon. Excuse me? Are you neglecting your duties? Are you mentally unstable? Bram's voice was calm, clinical. I'm not judging. I'm asking. I'm trying to save my daughter's life. I know, but that doesn't answer the question. She wanted to throw the oatmeal at him. Instead, she set down her spoon, very carefully. I've missed 12 board meetings in the last 6 months. I've delegated 3 major contract negotiations to subordinates. And yes, I've been distracted. But the company is still profitable, still growing. Not good enough? Bram pushed his tray aside. Profitable isn't safe. Growing isn't secure. If Fisk and Detweiler can make a case that you're a liability, the other board members will fall in line. It's just math. So what do I do? You fight back. How? I'm living in a homeless shelter. He smiled. That's actually your advantage. They spent the afternoon in the public library on Fifth Avenue. Bram sat at a computer terminal, his fingers moving across the keyboard with surprising speed. Julianne stood behind him, watching strings of financial data scroll across the screen. Fisk has been skimming, Bram said. Not much, just enough to hide. He's got a side company, Meridian Consulting LLC, that bills Halloway Industries for advisory services, $40,000 a month for the last 18 months. Julianne leaned closer. How did you find that? Public records, SEC filings, tax documents, it's all there if you know where to look. He opened another window. Detweiler's easier. She's been negotiating a deal with your biggest competitor and selling them proprietary data on your R&D pipeline. That's corporate espionage. Yep. Bram printed 2 pages, folded them carefully, and handed them to her. Bring this to the board meeting. Read it out loud, slowly. I told you, I can't attend. You won't, but your lawyer will. He stood stretching. You have a lawyer, right? Someone you trust? Yes. Vincent Park. Call him. Tell him to present this at the meeting. Tell him to invoke fiduciary duty violations and threaten a shareholder lawsuit. Fisk and Detweiler will panic. The rest of the board will turn on them to save themselves. Julianne stared at the papers in her hand. Who are you? Someone who's done this before. Bram walked toward the door. Come on, we need to get back before curfew. Vincent Park was 62 years old, with silver hair and a voice like gravel. He'd been Julianne's attorney for a decade, handling everything from contract disputes to custody arrangements. When she called him from a payphone outside the library, he listened in silence. This is insane, he said when she finished. I know. You're living in a shelter because a homeless man told you to. Essentially. And you want me to walk into a board meeting and accuse 2 senior executives of fraud based on documents provided by this same homeless man? Yes. Silence. Then, I'll do it. But Julianne, if this backfires, it won't. You don't know that. I do. She glanced at Bram, who was waiting by the curb. Trust me. The screening took 6 hours. Julianne sat in a plastic chair outside the examination room, watching doctors in white coats move back and forth with clipboards and vials of blood. So Bram had been inside for most of the afternoon. She hadn't seen him since they'd arrived. Finally, a doctor emerged, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a stethoscope around her neck. Ms. Halloway, Julianne stood. How is he? He's a perfect match. 10 out of 10 HLA markers. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never seen compatibility this precise. The doctor smiled. Your daughter is very lucky. When can we schedule the transplant? Mr. Vancamp wants to proceed immediately. We can do the extraction tomorrow morning, if you consent. Tomorrow, Julianne's knees went weak. And Cleo? She'll need to be prepped starting tonight. The conditioning regimen is aggressive. High-dose chemotherapy to destroy her existing bone marrow. It's going to be hard on her. She's already been through hell. I know. The doctor's expression softened. But this is different. This is the cure. That night, Julianne visited Cleo for the first time in a week. The hospital room was dim, lit only by the glow of monitors and the city lights filtering through the window. Cleo was asleep, her small body barely making a dent in the mattress. Julianne sat beside the bed and took her daughter's hand. It was cold. Too cold. I found him, she whispered. The match. His name is Bram, and he's going to save you. Cleo stirred, but didn't wake. I'm sorry I've been gone. I'm sorry for everything. Julianne's voice cracked. But it's going to be okay now. I promise. The door opened. A nurse stepped in, checked the monitors, and left without speaking. And Julianne stayed until visiting hours ended. Then she returned to the shelter, climbed into her bunk, and cried silently into the scratchy wool blanket. The transplant happened at 7 a.m. Julianne wasn't allowed in the operating room, but Vincent called her afterward with the news. It's done. The extraction went perfectly. They're transferring the marrow to Cleo now. She closed her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank your mysterious homeless man. Where is he? Recovery room. The doctors say he'll be released this afternoon. Julianne hung up and walked back to the shelter. Her legs felt like water. On day 23, Julianne woke to find Bram sitting on the floor outside her room. He was eating an apple, the kind that cost 50 cents from a street cart. We need to talk, he said. She climbed down from the bunk and followed him outside. The sun was just rising, painting the buildings gold and orange. The air was cold enough to burn her lungs. Your daughter's stable, Bram said. The marrow took. The doctors are optimistic. I know. She'd visited Cleo twice in the last week, watched the color return to her daughter's cheeks, watched her smile for the first time in months. Which means we're almost done here. Bram tossed the apple core into a trash can. 30 days ends next Tuesday. You'll go back to your life. I'll go back to mine. Unless you marry me first. Right. He turned to face her. Which brings us to the third condition. The truth. Julianne's chest tightened. I know. So tell me, why do you really need this marriage? She'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times in her head. But now, and standing in the cold morning light with Bram's grey eyes fixed on her, all the words evaporated. It's not about love, she said finally. Obviously, it's about custody. She swallowed hard. Cleo's father, my ex-husband, is contesting the custody arrangement. He's claiming that I'm an unfit mother because of the company, the stress, the time I spend away from her. He wants full custody. And marriage helps how? Because the court looks at stability. A two-parent household has a better chance than a single mother who works 80 hours a week. If I'm married, even on paper, it changes the equation. Bram was quiet for a long time. That's it? That's the big secret? There's more. Julianne forced herself to meet his eyes. My ex-husband is Richard Halloway, my late father's business partner. When my father died, Richard and I inherited the company equally. We got married 6 months later. It was stupid. I thought he loved me. I thought we were building something together. But he didn't. No, he loved the company. He loved the power. And when I filed for divorce 3 years ago, he fought me for everything. The company, the house, Cleo. Her hands were shaking. I won the company and primary custody, but he's never stopped trying to take them back. And now he's using Cleo's illness as ammunition. Yes, the word tasted like ash. He's arguing that I prioritized work over her health, that I was negligent. And the worst part is, he's not entirely wrong. Bram reached out and tilted her chin up. His touch was gentle, unexpected. You're trying to save your daughter's life. That's not negligence. Tell that to the judge. I will if I have to. He dropped his hand. But first, you need to finish the 30 days. On day 28, Julianne broke. It started small. A missed meal. A sleepless night. The woman in the bunk below her had coughed for 6 hours straight. A wet, rattling sound that echoed in Julianne's skull. By morning, she was shaking. Bram found her in the bathroom, sitting on the floor with her knees pulled to her chest. Get up, he said. She didn't move. Julianne, get up. I can't. Her voice was barely a whisper. I can't do this anymore. 2 more days. I don't care. She looked up at him, and her face was streaked with tears. My daughter is recovering from a bone marrow transplant, and I'm living in a homeless shelter because you decided I needed perspective. This is insane. You're insane. Bram crouched beside her. You're right. What? You're right. This is insane. I'm asking you to do something impossible because I'm angry at a world that chewed me up and spit me out, and I'm punishing you for being everything I used to be. Julianne stared at him. Then why? Because you need to understand what it costs. His voice was low, fierce. Not money, not power. What it costs to lose everything and keep breathing anyway. That's what I'm teaching you. I don't want to learn this. I know. He stood and held out his hand. But you're going to, because in 2 days, you're going back to your penthouse and your board meetings and your billion-dollar company. And you're going to look at people like me, people who sleep under bridges and beg for food. And you're going to remember. And that's the price. She took his hand. Let him pull her to her feet. I hate you, she said. I know that too. On day 30, Bram woke Julianne before dawn. Get dressed, he said. We're going somewhere. They took the subway to Lower Manhattan. The train was nearly empty, just a few early morning commuters staring at their phones. Bram led her through a maze of streets until they reached a building she recognized, a glass and steel tower on Water Street. That's Meridian Towers, Julianne said. It used to house half a dozen tech startups. Used to? Bram pressed his hand against the door. It clicked open. Still does, technically, but most of them are gone now. They climbed 12 flights of stairs. Bram moved like a ghost, silent and sure-footed. At the top, he pushed open a door marked Authorized Personnel Only. The office inside was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River. Furniture draped in dust covers. Computer equipment stacked in corners. Someone had left a coffee mug on the desk. The liquid inside had turned to sludge. This was mine, Bram said quietly. 10 years ago, I founded a company called Vanguard Biomedical. We developed imaging software, algorithms that could detect tumors 6 months earlier than conventional scans. We had contracts with hospitals in 14 countries. We were going to change medicine. Julianne turned slowly, taking in the space. What happened? A competitor stole our code, undercut our prices. By the time we proved the theft in court, we'd lost everything. Investors pulled out. Employees quit. The company collapsed in 6 months. He walked to the window. I tried to rebuild. I took out loans, mortgaged my house, but the damage was done. I lost it all. Who was the competitor? Bram smiled, but it was bitter. A little startup called Halloway Industries. Julianne's blood turned to ice. No. Your father didn't steal the code himself. He hired people to do it. Contractors. Hackers. They covered their tracks well, but I knew. Bram's voice was flat. I spent 2 years trying to prove it. By the time I gave up, I was living in my car. Bram, your father destroyed my life, destroyed my company, and when I saw your name in the bone marrow registry, I thought... He stopped, shook his head. I thought maybe it was justice. Maybe the universe was giving me a chance to make you suffer the way I suffered. But you helped me. Julianne's voice was shaking. You saved Cleo. You helped me fight the board. I know, he turned to face her, because somewhere along the way, I realized something. Your daughter isn't responsible for your father's sins, and neither are you. Tears burned Julianne's eyes. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. I believe you. He crossed the room and stopped in front of her. And that's why I'm going to finish this. We have a deal. 30 days in exchange for a transplant and a marriage. I keep my promises. You don't have to. Yes, I do. His grey eyes were steady. Because unlike your father, I'm not a thief. They were married in a courthouse on Center Street. The ceremony took 9 minutes. Vincent Park stood as witness, looking bewildered and vaguely concerned. Julianne wore a dress she'd bought at a thrift store for $8. Bram wore the same coat he'd been wearing the night they met. When the judge pronounced them married, Bram kissed her cheek. It was brief, perfunctory, a signature on a contract. Afterward, they walked to a diner on Canal Street and ordered coffee. The custody hearing is next week, Julianne said. Will you come? Do you want me to? I don't know. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. This whole thing is a performance. A marriage on paper to make me look stable. But Richard's lawyers are going to tear it apart. Not if I'm convincing. Can you be? Bram smiled. I've been pretending to be homeless for 5 years. I think I can pretend to be your husband for an afternoon. Julianne laughed, though it came out more like a sob. Why did you really agree to this? And don't say perspective. He was quiet for a long time. And then, because your daughter deserves a chance, and because... He stopped, started again. Because I spent 5 years hating your father, hating you by extension, and I'm tired of it. Revenge doesn't fix anything. It just makes you bitter. So this is redemption? Maybe. Or maybe it's just moving on. He took a sip of coffee. Either way, I'm done living in the past. The courthouse smelled like floor polish and old paper. Julianne sat at a long table with Vincent on her left and Bram on her right. Across the aisle, Richard Halloway sat with his legal team. 3 attorneys in expensive suits, their faces smooth and confident. Richard himself looked exactly as she remembered. Tall, handsome in a sterile way, eyes like chips of ice. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain, and everyone stood. This is a custody modification hearing for Cleo Marie Halloway, the judge said. Mr. Halloway is petitioning for full custody based on allegations of parental neglect. Ms. Halloway opposes. Let's begin. Richard's lead attorney stood. Her name was Margaret Cross, and she had a reputation for evisceration. Your Honor, the evidence is clear. Ms. Halloway has prioritized her business interests over her daughter's welfare. In the 6 months following Cleo's cancer diagnosis, Ms. Halloway missed 12 critical medical appointments. She delegated her daughter's care to hired staff while she traveled internationally for business meetings. And when Cleo's condition deteriorated, Ms. Halloway, she paused for effect, disappeared for 30 days, and living in a homeless shelter while her daughter underwent life-threatening medical procedures. Julianne's jaw tightened. Furthermore, Cross continued, Ms. Halloway has recently entered into a hasty marriage with a man she barely knows, a man with no employment history, no permanent address, and no apparent means of supporting a family. This is not the behavior of a stable, responsible parent. The judge looked at Julianne. Ms. Halloway, do you have a response? Vincent stood. Your Honor, we'd like to call a witness, Mr. Bram Vancamp. Bram rose and walked to the witness stand. He moved like water, fluid, unhurried. He was wearing a suit Julianne had bought him that morning. It fit perfectly. Mr. Vancamp, Vincent began, can you explain your relationship with Mrs. Halloway? I'm her husband. Bram's voice was calm. Oh, we were married last Tuesday. And prior to the marriage? I was a bone marrow donor for her daughter Cleo. I'm the only compatible match in the global registry. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Margaret Cross leaned over to whisper something to Richard. Can you describe the circumstances of your first meeting with Ms. Halloway? Vincent asked. She found me living on the streets. She offered me money, housing, medical care, anything I wanted, in exchange for donating bone marrow to save her daughter's life. And what did you ask for in return? Bram looked directly at Richard. I asked her to spend 30 days living the way I lived. Homeless, no money, no safety net. I wanted to see if she understood what it meant to sacrifice everything for someone she loved. And did she? Yes, she spent 30 days in shelters. She ate in soup kitchens, she slept on floors, and she did it all without complaint, because her daughter's life depended on it. Bram's voice was steady, unyielding. Julianne Halloway is the most determined, selfless person I've ever met. She didn't neglect her daughter. She fought for her, and she's still fighting. The courtroom was silent. Vincent nodded. One more question, Mr. Vancamp. Miss Cross suggested that you have no employment history and no means of supporting a family. Is that accurate? Bram smiled. No, Your Honor. It's not. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. This is a financial disclosure statement. For the past 5 years, I've been living under an assumed identity while managing a series of investment portfolios under various corporate entities. The current value of those portfolios is approximately $940 million. Julianne's heart stopped. I'm not homeless, Bram continued. I chose to live that way because I was running from my past, but I'm done running now. He handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. She read it slowly, her eyebrows rising. Mr. Vancamp, the judge said, are you telling this court that you're a billionaire? Close enough. He looked at Richard. And I'm more than capable of providing for my wife and stepdaughter. The hearing lasted another 2 hours, but the outcome was inevitable. The judge denied Richard's petition and upheld Julianne's primary custody. As they left the courthouse, Richard caught Julianne's arm. This isn't over, he said quietly. Yes, Bram said, stepping between them. It is. Richard stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away. The emergency board meeting had been rescheduled 3 times. When it finally convened, Julianne walked into the conference room with Bram at her side. Gerald Fisk looked up from his phone, his face pale. Karen Detweiler didn't look up at all. "Gentlemen, ladies." Julianne took her seat at the head of the table. "I believe we have some things to discuss." Fisk cleared his throat. "Julianne, we were concerned. You were staging a coup." She slid a folder across the table. "Mr. Park has compiled evidence of embezzlement, corporate espionage, and breach of fiduciary duty. The documents inside outline a pattern of theft and fraud dating back 18 months. You're both fired, effective immediately." Detweiler finally looked up. "You can't." "I can. And I will." Julianne's voice was ice. "You have two options. Resign quietly and accept a severance package, or fight this publicly and spend the next decade in litigation. Your choice." Fisk and Detweiler exchanged glances. Then slowly, Fisk stood. "We'll resign," he said. "Smart." Julianne turned to the rest of the board. "Anyone else want to try their luck?" No one spoke. "Good." Meeting adjourned. 3 months later, Cleo was declared cancer-free. Julianne stood in the hospital room, watching her daughter sleep. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. The IV drip had been removed 2 weeks ago, leaving only a small bruise on Cleo's hand. Bram appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "How is she?" he asked. "Perfect." Julianne took the coffee. "The doctors say she's responding better than they expected. The marrow is fully integrated. No signs of rejection." "That's good." They stood in silence for a while, watching Cleo breathe. "I'm filing for divorce," Julianne said quietly. Bram nodded. "I know. We had a deal. The marriage was for the custody hearing. That's over now." "It is. But—" She stopped, started again. "I don't want you to disappear." He looked at her. "What do you want?" "I want you to stay. Not as my husband, not as a business arrangement. Just stay." "In your life?" "Yes." Bram was quiet for a long time. Then he set down his coffee and took her hand. "5 years ago," he said, "I lost everything. I thought I'd never get it back. But then I met a woman who knelt in an alley and begged a stranger to save her daughter. And I realized—" He squeezed her hand. "The ground isn't where you fall. It's where you start over." Julianne's eyes burned. "So, is that a yes?" "It's a yes." They were married again 6 months later. A real wedding this time, in a garden overlooking the Hudson River. Cleo was the flower girl. She wore a white dress and carried a basket of roses, and she smiled the entire time. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Bram kissed Julianne like he meant it. Like this was the beginning of something real. And maybe it was. Afterward, at the reception, Cleo tugged on Bram's sleeve. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always." "Why did you say yes when my mom asked you to help?" Bram knelt, so they were eye level. "Because your mom reminded me that some things are worth fighting for. And you—" he tapped her nose gently, "are one of them." Cleo smiled. Then she hugged him, fierce and tight. Julianne watched from across the room, her heart full. For the first time in years, she wasn't fighting, she wasn't falling. She was just standing on solid ground, and it felt like coming home. And so, from the cold concrete of a homeless shelter to the warmth of a family made whole, Julianne and Bram discovered that the ground isn't where we fall, it's where we begin again. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that redemption is always within reach, no matter how far we've fallen, I have a challenge for you. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances. Subscribe if you believe love can be found in the most unexpected places. And here's the real dare. Drop a comment below and tell me, Would you have accepted Bram's condition? Would you have traded 30 days of your life to save someone you love? I genuinely want to know your thoughts because your stories matter just as much as the ones we tell here. Until our next journey together, may you always remember the ground beneath your feet, and may you never be too proud to kneel when love requires it. Be blessed, be kind, and keep believing in the impossible.